Okay, let's start again. Focus on leadership and the relationship between the leadership's job and the first teacher's job. For this section, I'm drawing on work from the literacy project where there were lead teachers in every school, the wider research on first teachers lead, when a teacher becomes a teacher leader, and other work that I've done in secondary schools. Because in New Zealand, nearly always when there's a ministry-funded professional development initiative, a lead teacher or a first teacher is appointed. So let's go on to what are some of the potential issues impacting on the work of first teachers that have leadership implications too. Because tomorrow I'll focus very much on the work of first teachers, but given there are some leaders here, I want to also talk about what the research would show is a leadership job and what is a first teacher job. As I said, I'm assuming that first teachers will have a role in terms of promoting the professional learning of other teachers. The three that there's many issues, but the three that I am focusing on this afternoon is ambiguous roles and changed relationships. The second one is too much going on and not enough time to focus on any one area to improve. Relates to my earlier question of did you have too many things going on, too many initiatives? And the third one I'll spend a little bit of time on now because I won't come back to it. So probably almost the worst role that can be given to a first teacher is to focus on individuals' teachers' remediation. So a teacher is not doing very well, so the leader sends the first teacher to work with that teacher. Why that is negative is that quickly word spreads. Well, the first teacher will come and work with you if you're not very good. And that doesn't help what I refer to as developing collective responsibility for professional and student learning through an inquiry process. In that it is much better to have that teacher that is the target part of the inquiry process with others. It is much more positive, much more likely to get the change because they're working with people who are good teachers, seeking to get better, than to single out a teacher and say, you go and fix them. The other thing is that you can't really fix anybody. That person has to be wanting to learn from the first teachers, and it's really the role of the school leaders to help that teacher identify that they've got issues that they need to work on. Then the first teacher comes and works with them. But I say if you do it individually, very quickly the first teachers are going to get the reputation that fixing other teachers is their job, and that's not very productive. The exception, of course, may be supporting newly qualified teachers who are in their first, second, third year of teaching. But again, rather than working with them individually, if your school is big enough to work, if there's a group of them, it gets the collective learning processes. Learning is social. We learn from one another. And you have expertise as lead teachers, so the collective learning is much more powerful. Okay, coming up to this ambiguous roles and change relationships. There's quite a lot of literature on this, research literature, that first teachers cannot take over the leadership roles of defining what the new role is with the first teacher colleagues. It can't be up to the first teacher to say, well, now I'm going to work with you guys, I'm going to help you with your professional learning. That needs to be established at the leadership level rather than at the first teacher level. So if a leader believes and has good evidence that things need to change, then that's the leadership role, about getting that momentum going, that agreement that yes, there does need to be some change, and then the first teacher working with it. The other one is the second dash I've got down here, is addressing all the teaching-related challenges in the school. You go and put out fires all the time. Again, this does not lead to the development of collective responsibility. If you find you're rushing from place to place to place, then this is not going to actually develop the inquiry and collective responsibility that we know is associated with real school improvement. The other problem that is endemic across the world of people in your positions or first teacher positions is finding time to work with colleagues if no formal time has been allocated. If you're going to work seriously with colleagues, then there needs to be allocated time. It depends on the culture of your school and whether it's in school time released or if it's after school or before school, but there needs to be allocated time. That literacy project, the teachers only had 2 days out of their classrooms a year to engage in that project. All the other time was after school time, meeting time. Most schools changed their meetings. I've actually got this further on. So instead of having administration meetings, they changed all their meetings to be learning meetings and did the administration on the internet. You don't actually have to have a face-to-face conversation to say an event is happening and these things need to be in place and these people need to be there. In our schools, we found a lot of face-to-face meeting time was spent with that kind of thing, the sports event, the visitor coming from somewhere, the health nurse visiting the school. It does not need to happen face-to-face. So there's lots of different ways of organising time, and you have to be creative, but you also have to be determined and to give this time priority. The other thing that counts against time is too much going on. The international research is consistent that doing more and more change does not equal better educational outcomes. The less that each teacher, if you want the deep learning that is required for substantive change, each teacher can't be involved in more than one area at any one time, and usually for an extended time. The results again show that a year is almost minimal, 2 years is better. 2 years things become embedded in terms of the change. So it's learning in one area with a deep focus, then transfer the learning to other areas. Smattering across the top with doing lots and lots of different things is not productive. Again, actually, the origins of this research came from Tony Brick in the United States, who talked about picking presents off the Christmas tree. This is being offered and that's being offered and this is being offered. And in the Chicago school reform, he found that when schools did that, they didn't get improvement. When they focused, they got improvement. I led the evaluation of all our schooling improvement initiatives in New Zealand, a team to evaluate those. And again, the results were quite clear. When schools focused on one area, they got good gains. When they focused on improving in more than one area, they didn't get the gains. So there's good research evidence on that. So what do I mean by focused learning in an area? This is just sort of a cross-sectional diagram through the cycle, the inquiry cycle, and that you start in the centre with student learning. And when you found out what's going on there, the arrows go up to determining the teacher learning, and of course you get arrows back down. But learning in this one area, people get frustrated and say, but we have so much we need to learn, and that's fine. You need to systematically transfer the learning. So you start with students in an area of focus, then you transfer the learning to other contexts, other students, other curriculum areas. You don't try and learn everything at once. In most of the successful projects I've been involved with, teachers have really focused on a small group of students in terms of learning how to change their practice. And then they have transferred to all the students. They haven't started with all students because that's really difficult. If you're really learning to diagnose what's going on for a student, having 6 to 10 students or 8 students is actually much easier to get a handle on. And then what have you learned about those that you can use for the others? Otherwise, things get bogged down in trying to find out too much before you actually get on with the change process. This is what usually happens in teacher professional development, is one teacher gets lots of things, some get none. Most of it's different for different teachers, and a little bit filters through to student learning because it's focused on the teaching practice rather than the student learning focus. So try and avoid that scenario because we know it doesn't result in substantive change. So both students and teachers, I had the slide up for students before, but both students and teachers need to know where we're going, what are our goals, how are we doing in relation to those goals, and where to next. The students need to know for themselves. The teachers need to know both for their students and themselves. In terms of students, we often think they should just be for their own learning goals. But I was in a primary school in New Zealand recently. The age of the senior students was 10 years old. And the principal had school-wide data. It was at the very beginning of the year, actually, so a few months ago, because our year starts in February. And they had assessed the students at the end of the previous year, done the analysis over the summer break. And she took the analysis for the whole school for each year level from year 1 through to year 6, where these students were, and said to the students, what do you make of this? Now, apart from an amazing mathematics and graphing lesson, because she had cut the data in different ways and showed them the progressions from year 1 to year 6 and how many students had reached the standard. And what was really fascinating was that the girls' writing was better than the boys' writing, and the results. And instead of telling the boys, no, your results aren't good enough, she said, what do you make of this? And the boys were quite indignant. We're as good as the girls. And she said, well, show us. So that became one of their school goals, was for the boys to improve their writing. So nothing like a bit of competition, of course. But if you can do that at primary school, why can't you do it at secondary school? And to get the students involved not only in their own personal learning goals, but in the whole school learning goals. So that every student and every teacher knew where they were going. So a leadership task is to set these school-wide goals for students. And it's really important. We know about goal theory and how important goals are in directing our practice. So school goals are broad statements about what you want to achieve for students in your focus of inquiry. They may be vague, but that's okay as long as you've got really smart targets. I've got here a third bullet point. They form the basis of your strategic and annual plans, and I've asked various people since I've been in Sweden, do schools have strategic and annual plans? And I'm told, well, most of them do, but it's not very important. Make them come alive. They should be the driver of the school's improvement efforts, because every teacher's goal should be related to those collective goals. They might be individual for the teacher, but they should contribute to the collective goals. And they're likely to be a focus over a number of years, not just one, because if you're looking for major shifts, you should be getting substantial shifts in a year, but if you really want to solve a major problem, it will probably take you longer than a year. So looking at the characteristics of effective goals in an area of inquiry, and this says should be related to your strategic and annual plans. Very few goals. If for any one teacher, as I said, it should only be one, and it may be different for different parts of your school, that's fine. But for any one teacher, if they're involved in more than one deep inquiry, then you're going to get less change. They should be student-focused, not teacher-focused. Directly linked to your strategic annual plans, based on evidence of the current situation, and I'll talk more about the importance of having some baseline evidence on what's happening now. Oops, all of them. Everyone who influences the achievement of the goal is involved in setting it. That example, I talked about the students setting the school goals. The girls' goal wasn't about writing, they had a different one. And that most people, if you're going to get commitment to the goals, most people must think these are worthwhile or the right goals. And that's why you have to involve them in the process. They need to be realistic, but they need to be challenging. Teachers and students need to have confidence that there will be support to achieve them. There's no point in setting a goal and saying, do it, because if people could do it, they would have already done it. They must be a priority. If you're serious about improvement, then they need to be the priority, and all other decisions are made in relation to that priority. And ways of monitoring progress, which I will talk a bit more about. So goals are the broad ones, targets. Targets are the one that really count. And we have some quite powerful research in New Zealand to show that when individual students have targets and the whole school has targets, then things really do start happening, and that that there's a whole lot of activity around them. Targets are smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. That's what the SMART acronym's for. They're very specific to the student challenge you've identified at the beginning of the inquiry process, at a year level in a subject with a specific group of students, and they articulate the shift you want to get. So the teacher, you say, who says, this is my kingdom, this is my classroom, no one is allowed in, they have to be engaged in this process of goal setting and target setting, and then look at, so they know where the school is going and where they need to go and what it looks like at the moment and for their students. That can be a very powerful process to get people out of that mode of this is good enough. But it does take strong leadership. I'm not trying to pretend this is easy. I'm sort of going through these processes, but if you haven't got really strong goals, they're just sort of on pieces of paper and nobody can say what they are, then bringing them into the centre of your school work, the work in your schools, is a challenging process. In the effective schools I've been in, every teacher, I can't say that every student, but most students know what the goals are, they know what they're working on to contribute collectively to those goals. Again, another leadership task, rather than a task of a first teacher, is to identify the baseline evidence. That first part of the inquiry cycle is actually about getting baseline evidence. It gives a picture of the current situation in an area of inquiry. As I said before, and I will work on this more tomorrow, it probably needs a quantitative element to it, some assessment results, but qualitative evidence often is just as powerful, and quite often more powerful for teachers than statistics and numbers and averages. In fact, averages can hide so much that I very rarely use them. You must have baseline evidence data if you're actually going to measure your improvement efforts. It justifies and describes the challenge you're trying to solve. Everyone gets a much clearer picture. Rather than just we're trying to improve mathematics, we have a target for this area of mathematics that we're all going to focus on this term, and this is where we're at, and this is where we want to be, and we're going to have ways to monitor progress at least each term, probably more often because your school terms are a little longer than ours. So this is kind of where the rubber hits the road. You get away from the kind of what to the how do you get this culture and this movement, and get to a place where the first teachers can work really effectively by providing the support for things to improve. So a target might look like this. This is from a primary school. In 2014, the Year 5 exceeding the benchmark, the Year 5 achieving it, the Year 5 students below, and then that should be 2013. And then the target for 2015, and you've got what the situation was in 2014. By adding the 12 and the 65, you get 77% of the Year 5 students met or exceeded whatever the area was. Next year, we're aiming for 85%. So you've got a way to go. For teachers, it is much more powerful if you've got names beside those ones that you're really going to try and shift. And what we have found, if teachers learn how to teach deeply those ones that are struggling and not a benchmark, they actually teach everyone more effectively. So I've not been afraid of this sort of target, focusing on target students. But then you have to say, well, how does that apply to everybody? Not just the targets. Otherwise you get the sort of artificial bubble kids jumping over the line rather than everybody going up. So to have this, then teachers need learning goals as well as students. So the students have their learning goals, you get the goals and the targets for the students. And every teacher in your school should have a learning goal about how they're going to learn to get the students up to that target. Because if they knew how, they would do it. And it's trying to get that culture, and I've been asked about this, how do you get the culture of inquiry? This is the start of it. You don't instantly get a culture of inquiry by setting goals and targets. Of course you don't. You get a culture of inquiry when you've got clear goals and targets, and you make very clear as a school leader that you're expecting everybody to work towards them. We talk often about high expectations for students. It is just as important for leaders to have high expectations of teachers. Much more difficult though, of course. So what does a teacher learning goal might look like? So it would be students' learning goals are these. My new understandings to achieve the goals. And mathematics is a powerful teaching of fractions in primary school. My new practice and which students I will try it out with. So when I said have your 6, 8, 10 target students, they're the students you try things out with. You don't stop there, but rather than try things out with everybody, learn with these groups of students so that you learn how to teach everyone more effectively. And how will I monitor if this new practice is making a difference to students? This question of monitoring is usually left off. I've seen lots of coaching conversations in the coaching literature. In the coaching work that I have done, the question the coach always asks is, when they finish the coaching session, how will you know if the new practice we have talked about is more effective with your students than what you did before. Otherwise, it's just new practice. What's critical is that it is more effective with the students. So how will this teacher monitor whether the new things they are learning is actually making a difference? But in terms of leadership, it does require changes in organisational practices. Because if your collective improvement efforts are to be successful in achieving goals for students and teachers, and not fragmented across a whole lot of areas, it means systematically creating time for opportunities to learn. As I said, it depends on the culture of your schools and your teachers, and I wouldn't begin to say teachers must have this much time away from classrooms. What I am saying is that you do need to systematically create formally and prioritised and protected time for learning. And as I mentioned before, meetings are the big one that I usually tackle in a school, and really go through with leaders and say, what meetings do you have, and are they really promoting the achievement of your school goals? Do you have professional learning communities in your schools? One Australian school that was involved in this work, I asked them, yeah, we have professional learning communities. I said, well, is your inquiry focus the focus of those communities? And they said, oh, it can't be, because we do, this was primary school, reading one community, maths the next one, writing the next one. And I said, well, you may as well not have them, and they're not going to help. So how else can you create time? I hear some laughter. Do you want to comment? No? Please do if I'm on the wrong track. Okay, this comes back to Tony Bright again. You cannot improve what you cannot measure. Now, I probably wouldn't make quite such a strong statement as that, but measurement, I'm coming to realise, to keep people focused and to keep improvement and learning as a priority, you actually do have to have some way of measuring it. And it means measuring in the short term, the long term, and both the processes you believe will lead to improvement and the outcomes that you want to improve. So that's a lot of monitoring. So that's why I was so pleased when that secondary school I talked about came up with the idea of monitoring the teaching process by just surveying the students. Simple 5-question survey can get you all the information you need. So don't make the monitoring onerous, because you want time for improvement. The measurement should not be taking over the improvement efforts. The measurement should be a way of monitoring, are our efforts actually having the results we want them to have? Because if they're not, we need to stop. And if things aren't changing quite quickly, then you need to rethink the process. Most people think this takes a lot longer. The change process takes a lot longer than it should. One of the ways of not having change is to spend forever and ever measuring and never getting started, rather than getting some ideas together, getting some good data and moving on, and then revisiting when it's wrong. It's actually a better process and a more energetic process than measuring and measuring and measuring forever. Why monitor? It's really important to keep the goals and targets a priority. And if you don't monitor it, the goals and targets disappear. If we don't know what progress we're making, then you lose momentum. So it's evidence of student actions and evidence. So are the students doing anything differently? And I'm not talking necessarily about formal testing. One of the most powerful ways we had in the literacy project was to interview students. First question was, as I think I mentioned before in this talk, what are you supposed to be learning about writing while you're doing this exercise? And they couldn't tell us. when we fed back to the teachers the results of those interviews, that was much more powerful for those teachers than any numerical achievement results, when their students were not understanding what they were trying to teach them. And of course, what was important was not that we kept asking questions as researchers, but the teachers learned how to interview their students themselves. And this actually took surprising amount of training because, and I can understand the teacher's frustration, you know, they've taught something and they interview the students about what you're supposed to be learning and the students don't come up with the right answer. The temptation is to tell them what they were supposed to be learning rather than finding out. So it's coming with that curiosity for the students. And it takes another of those mind shifts for teachers to stop thinking that this is another opportunity to tell. This is an opportunity for the students to tell the teachers what they think they're supposed to be learning. Very powerful experience. So that's evidence of the student actions, so that would be evidence of student actions. Are they understanding it and are they acting on feedback? That's another very good way of finding out whether the students are learning anything new. Are they actually taking on the feedback and changing their practice? Evidence of changes in teaching practice. Make it simple, because otherwise you spend all your time, as I said, monitoring. And evidence of change in organisational practices. Have we set things up in the school that keeps the priority, keeps the focus in a way that, so we've reorganised meeting times, we've reorganised the timetable so teachers can get together, and are we monitoring whether that's really happening? Because so often I find in schools that, yes, they've got this allocated teacher learning time, but someone's sick, so one of those teachers has to go and teach in that class. There's been another crisis over there, so the first teacher or leader of the group is dealing with the crisis. So in reality, those learning times don't happen at all, or they're fragmented and some people are there 1 week and new people are there the next week. Some people are leaving early, arriving early, others are leaving early, and it just doesn't work. Sorry, arriving late and leaving early. That has to be dedicated time with priority. You have to find some other way of dealing with the crises. So this is an area, this is a monitoring sheet that a school developed. And I come back to the baseline. So across the top, this is the area of intended change. I've obviously taken out their writing. What did the baseline data tell us about what was happening? At half term, what changes would we expect to see and how will we know? So this is planned. This is in advance. What are we going to expect to see? That provides the incentive for the change. After a term, what are we hoping to see? You won't get everything in place after a term, but you should have some substantive things, and after 1.5 terms. And it's for each of those areas, the student learning and engagement, or whatever your area is, that your focus is. Changes in teaching practice, if that's relevant to your focus. It may not be. It might be changes in leadership practice. Usually I have that on the sheet too. And changes in organisational practice. So it's not just have we changed the meetings, but do the professional learning times actually happen? Or are we just, is it all disappearing? So very systematic thinking through early on in the process, once you've got your focus and you've identified the changes you're expecting to see, to fill in those boxes with what you're expecting and to monitor. So the leader's role is to work with others to set the goals and targets and identify how they'll be monitored, develop a culture of collective responsibility to achieve them. Oh, easy job. First teacher's role is to work with the groups of teachers to facilitate a focused inquiry process to achieve the goals and targets for themselves and their students. And they're quite distinctive roles, unless, of course, the first teacher is part of the leadership team, but I don't think they are in Sweden. So I want you to just talk for 5 minutes about, less than 5 minutes, some possible implications for you as a leader and as a first teacher. You may disagree, that's fine. I'd like to hear about the disagreements. So probably 4 minutes, and then we'll wrap up with your thoughts. Okay. Any questions or comments, disagreements? Is this just so far away from your experience that it's unrealistic? No? Good. Well, someone must have a comment. I gather there's plenty on Facebook, but I can't read them. No? Okay, well, we'll finish with, just getting time to go. Thank you very much for listening, and you certainly participated with one another. But hopefully tomorrow we'll smaller groups, and we can have a more interactive conversation about some of the how to do this, and in a range of situations, not just in the inquiry process. So thank you very much.